to this in the Geisler video today, so let me go over this again. While somebody may say they're a relativist, in other words, they say they can actually live an existence as a relativist, in reality they can't. Well, I think that's just relatively true. So you go to a surgeon, and the surgeon says, yeah, I'll be glad to do heart surgery on you. And you go, well, that's great. How many of these have you done? Well, none. In fact, I've never cut on anybody in my life, but I did do a hangnail on my grandma one time. The relativist would say it doesn't make any difference because it doesn't make any difference. There is no truth. And so the relativist doesn't live that way. The relativist doesn't get on a plane that he's told that plane's got one wing. The relativist doesn't do that. He will say that he believes in relativism, but in fact, if he goes to the bank and he says, I need to make a withdrawal and I want to withdraw $10,000, and they tell him he hadn't got $10,000. He says, well, I've got it right here in my bank account. It shows, well, the last statement you sent me says I got $50,000. I want to withdraw 10, and they go, no, you can't have that because we don't think you got $10,000. The relativist is going to get upset. So in reality, he doesn't live what he says he believes. Nobody can live that lifestyle. If you thought that chair was only relatively true, that it would hold you up, you wouldn't sit down in it. Right? Yet none of you, I didn't see any of you pause or check the chair out before you sit down. You just believed that's a chair and I'm going to sit down in it, it's going to hold me up. Right? So in safety, in money, in medicine, in relationships, well, she says she loves me relatively. Relative to what? Relative to how much I love my dog. I love you that much. Court proceedings. You go to court, you want the judge to make a decision, right? And the law says whatever decision he makes, that's what's going to be upheld. If it's just relatively true, who's going to pay any attention to it? Why should we have to? So none of us live that way. Yeah, Pastor.
There's a program on Fox News called The Five. Comes on at 5 o'clock Eastern time in the afternoon. And got 5 people there, and they are laying out a thing, and then they discuss it. And then some people challenge them. Well, there's this one fella, he's always spouting off stuff. And the fellow who challenges him will say, so then is it true that, and then he'll go, well, relatively yes. So this fellow right back and goes, well, that's a no.
Yeah, exactly.
So relatively, well, that's another no.
So really everybody believes there's absolute truth. Everybody really believes that because that's how they live. It's like I tell people in church a lot of times when I'm preaching a sermon, I'll say, how you live is what you believe. If you come to church on Sunday and live like hell all week long, that's what you believe. You don't really believe what we're preaching, right? So there's a difference in what we say we believe and what we believe. Then there's an incongruity there. And so the relativist really doesn't believe in relative truth because he doesn't live that way. There's nobody that really lives that way, ever. Okay. The absolute and the relative. The phrase absolute truth is redundant. The relative truth is just a contradiction in terms. Does truth change experience, available knowledge, and culture? As I experience things, I learn more and more of truth, but that doesn't mean the truth changed, right? I used to do a lot of horseback riding. As I got to know that horse, I became more one with that horse. Why? Because I knew the truth concerning him. I could see problems coming if he was a balker, if he would balk from a sparrow landing on the side of the road. I knew that was going to happen, so if I saw a bird coming, I go, okay, he's going to balk. I knew the ones that wouldn't cross the creek, right? But that didn't change the fact that that's the way that animal was. It made me better anticipating. Available knowledge. So the more knowledge I have about something, the more truth I know about it, but it doesn't change the fact, right? It doesn't change the truth. Just because I know more about it or less about it doesn't change the truth.
That's where the importance of hermeneutics comes in.
Yeah.
Looking at Scripture, because you can just read it and think, but then you begin to study it, dig in it, word studies or whatever, and all of a sudden, voila. The truth has always been there.
And the more cross-references you've got, and you begin to piece this a phrase or a passage out of Hebrews with a passage out of Mark, you begin to put the pieces together and you go, wow, now I understand a little more. So you begin to understand the truth, but it doesn't change the truth. Truth has always been there. Two people in the same room at the same time, one's hot and the other's cold. I already talked about that. Let's go in the wrong way. Ancient truth, the earth is flat. We've talked about that already tonight. And the latter truth, the earth is round. Did the earth change? No, the earth didn't change. Your understanding of the earth changed. I've already used the cannibal explanation of Davi. He understood that it was wrong. So how did we get here? Really quickly. I'm going to give you a real quick history of what I'm calling the constructionist and deconstructionist. Historically, we've had a society and a culture that were constructionists. We were building truth upon truth, fact upon fact, precept upon precept, and the more we knew, the more truth we knew, right? Then came the deconstructionist. And I'm going to give you a really quick overview, philosophically, scientifically, mathematically. Richard Rorty is a guy that taught down at Stanford, and he was what you call a philosophical deconstructionist. He only believed in pragmatic truth, and he questioned even well-constructed syllogisms, which are ways to prove in logic that something is true. He says that we don't really have any tools to determine truth. And then came along a guy by the name of Jacques Derrida, and Derrida, the French are really involved big time in this whole thing. Derrida is a Frenchman, and he was called a language deconstructionist. He thought that words really did not have meaning. That you had to examine a word in a sentence, that first word, you had to examine it, you had to look all around it, you had to try to figure out, okay, I understand that word. Then you move to the second word, and then you had to, when you did all of the deconstruction of it and try to figure out what it meant, you didn't assign any meaning to it, you just tried to figure out what it meant. Then you had to go back to the first word to see how it related to the second word. Now, pretty soon you go insane like that. But Derrida said that words really didn't have meaning because there is no truth. So the words can't have any meaning, and putting words together certainly doesn't have any meaning, because if the single word doesn't have any meaning, the conglomerate of words doesn't have any meaning, right? Mathematicians today, there are literally highbrow, educated beings sitting at Stanford today in the mathematics department trying to prove that 2 plus 2 don't always equal 4. Now you laugh, but that's actually going on today.
Talked to a lady today who said it takes her children are being taught 7 steps before 2 equals 2. 7 steps they're taking.
Yeah,
Actually true.
I substituted in.
I was given a bank account today, so that's
Wow.
Yeah, I substituted in a class, and I saw how these kids are taught to do math the other day, and I'm blown away. So they said, how do you do this? I said, 2 steps, bang, bang. And I said, no, there's 7 steps here. There's 7 steps we got to go through to do this math problem. And I'm going, why are you doing this? This is part of the deconstructionist movement. It's exactly what it is. So then a guy by the name of Foucault came along. This is a really brief history of this, but he's a philosopher, and he is a historian of ideas, they say. He says philosophically that you can't make philosophical propositions that are absolute. And he says absolute truth does not exist. And of course you have to ask, is that true?
Is that absolutely true?
Is that true or is that absolutely true? If it's absolutely true that absolute truth doesn't exist, well, you've just proved at least one absolute truth exists. And if it's only relatively true, you've just defeated your own statement.
Well, that's like the previous one. If words have no meaning, then how can you use the words to explain that words have no meaning?
There it is. Yeah. Wow.
Okay, so this is what's going on today. The scientific deconstructionist is one you do need to be aware of. So I'm going to pause here just for a minute. The scientific deconstructionist says that we can't really accept any facts that we've accumulated, that we will have no truths there. We only have accepted narratives. And what Kuhn said was that these accepted narratives, he called paradigms, aren't really truths. They're just things that we accept as being legitimate, even though we can't say they're true. So what comes out of that is Kuhn has become critical of science, and he says scientists today are just kind of jumping from one paradigm to another and never really proving anything because they don't really believe truth exists. They're just discovering things, but they don't believe they're discovering any truth.
So they're looking for the truth and saying that they can't find it.
Well, they're not even looking for truth, Kuhn says, anymore. They're saying they're just discovering these things, these paradigms, but they're not really trying to find any truth in any of it. And as I said, we're not really without sin here. I've already described the fact that we've run as Christians from all of this as well. I was talking to a psychiatrist the other day. I'm trying to finish up an outline of a book that I'm writing, and I was talking to this guy in, I think he was in Ohio on the internet. And as I said, I was trying to describe this fact that we're living in this world where there's no truths, and he went, yeah, man, he says, it's driving me crazy trying to help people as a psychiatrist, because if there's no truth, I can't help them get any better. And so he said, and this is a quote, he says, I find all this denial of the existence of truth, fudging of truth, or running from it, a kind of self-induced psychosis. Now think about that.
It drives them nuts.
Yeah, I mean, we haven't got anything to build a foundation on. It's insanity. It's not clever, it's not smart, it's not brilliant. I saw Sam Harris interviewed the other day, this atheist that I was telling you about, and he said he sat in a class under Derrida, and he was listening to him and talk about the fact that these words didn't have any meaning. And he came out of the classroom, and of course everybody's wanting to interview Sam Harris, and there was a whole bunch of reporters there, and they said, well, what did you think of the great scholar Derrida? And Sam Harris looked at him and says, I think he's a nut. And he says, all these fawning students were just fawning all around Derrida and just, oh, look at the great man. Listen at this brilliance, this esoteric knowledge that he's got. Isn't he wonderful? No, Sam Harris says, I think he's a nut. I think Harris is closer to right than some of the fawning students. Okay, so let's get into number 2. Binaries are real in both the material and non-material world. Opposites cannot both be true, right? Opposites cannot both be true. The opposite of true is false. What is that? It's not relativism. What is it the opposite of? Okay. You're going to have to come back and tell me. You're going to do the research. This is called the law of non-contradiction. Something cannot be both true and false at the same time and in the same sense. Something cannot be both true and false at the same time and in the same sense. Anyone who denies the law of non-contradiction, this is a quote from a Muslim scholar. I love this. You ready for this? Anyone who denies the law of non-contradiction, he says, should be beaten and burned until he admits that to be beaten and burned is not the same as to not be beaten and burned.
I love that. Yeah. Yeah. Admits that being beaten is. Yeah.
Even the Muslims understand there's truth and there's falsehood. The Zen Buddhists, the Tao is beyond thought, is what they say. The Tao is pronounced D-O-W. The Tao is beyond thought. Well, if it's beyond thought, how do you think about it? So we just go, okay, the Tao's beyond thought, and we leave. Because there's nothing really to think about anyway. There's nothing really to learn here. All religions are true is another great misconception. Every path leads to heaven. All religions are true. Well, what about the religion that says in John 14:6, Jesus says, I am the way, the truth, and the life, and no one comes to the Father but by me. That's what you call, listen to me, you're going to have this phrase come up again, an exclusive truth claim. Exclusive truth claim.
And Jesus had a pile of them.
And every religion has exclusive truth claims. So they can't all be true. Do you understand what I'm saying? That's a critical nature of this understanding of truth.
So how is that if all religions are true, then that would be Christianity that says no religion, that all, or that Christianity says that, that we're the only way. That's true. It's entity and it's self-defeating.
Yeah, exactly. And we'll talk about that in a minute with the Bahai movement. Okay. 6 blind men are at 6 different parts of the elephant. One's feeling the trunk, one feeling the tail, one feeling the side, one feeling the leg. And they all come up with a different description of what they're feeling. Right? Does it change the truth that that's an elephant? One says, no, it's a rough wall. One says, no, it's a tree. I got the trunk of the tree. One says, no, it's a long branch. And, no, it's a twig. I got the tail. It's a twig. But does it change the truth that they haven't just got a piece of the truth? They got a factoid concerning the truth as we described it earlier. The Baha'i faith, this was written some time ago as a new religion. It's actually a very old religion now, teaching the essential worth of all religions. The unity of all people, established by Baha'u'llah, I'm not sure how to say that, in the 19th century. It initially grew in Persia and parts of the Middle East. Baha'is believe that God periodically reveals his will through divine messengers, thus the many Christs that have come along throughout history, whose purpose it is to transform the character of humankind and to develop it. So it's a progressing revelation of God through these different Christs, different prophets. Those who respond to moral, spiritual qualities of these religions, he says, are good, and those that don't are bad. Religion is thus seen as orderly, unified, and progressive from age to age. They essentially believe that every religion is true. You've got your truth, I've got my truth. All religions are true, and all religions are essentially good. Now, what's wrong with that? Satanism is a religion, right? Yeah.
Islamics say that Jesus was a prophet and he didn't die and wasn't resurrected, so that puts Christianity on trial.
Yeah. So you've got to have a true and a false. You've got to have these binaries. That's my whole point here. Everyone does not know the truth. Is hell fair? I hate, I'm going to say it again, I hate this word fair. Well, that's not fair. I want to know, is it right or is it wrong? Is it true or is it false? Fairness is a relative term based on subjectivism. It is totally a subjective thing. What I think is fair You may not think it's fair at all. If Chris has got $1 million and I go take it away from him, he ain't going to think that's fair. And I'm going to go, boy, that's really fair. Chris had too much, and I want to take $1 million, and it still leaves him a whole bunch, and I think it's extremely fair. So fairness is just, throw that out. These subjective arguments are worthless. Romans 1:18-20, write it down. There are no atheists. There are no real atheists. What does it say, Kenneth?
It says, the wrath of God is being revealed from heaven against all the godlessness and wickedness of men who suppress the truth by their wickedness. Since what may be known about God is plain to them,
It is.
because God has made it plain to them.
It is plain to them. That all the world can see and understand that much about God, right? Romans 1, creation reveals God. Romans 2, our conscience speaks of God. And Romans 8 is what? I'm going to give you some. Okay, the Spirit, your spirit communes with your spirit. So all of those are witnesses of God that don't require the Bible. Don't require a Christian to come in contact with you.
I like what Geisler said, that most atheists are suppressing the truth in themselves.
Yes.
They actually feel it in most of the books he read about the atheists, that you can see it, what Nietzsche,
Yeah.
Nietzsche himself was, and if you see it, God is dead.
Yeah.
And he's fighting against it. He's fighting against it. I like that. That's good.
Yeah. So one of the signers of the Humanist Manifesto was asked one time, said, why do you not believe in God? And in a rare moment of candor, he says, I don't believe in God because he would interfere with my chosen lifestyle. That's Aldous Huxley, one of the signers of the Humanist Manifesto. I don't believe in God. There's always this subversive reason or unspoken reason why people don't believe in God, that are so boisterous and want to lash out against God and lash out against those who would believe in God. There's always another thing beneath the surface of that. And part of our mission as apologists is to help them and us discover that, so we can have a good, productive conversation, and we can help people get through those things. And by the way, Aldous Huxley was a pedophile. And he says, that's my chosen lifestyle.
He was what?
A pedophile. Open pedophile.
We had a fellow in the program who left the program after he graduated, and then when he came back into the program, he's doing very well now in ministry. But when he came back into the program, came into my office and he says, that brand new Bible that you gave me for graduation, I have no idea where it is. Can you give me another one and I'll pay for it? And I said, so what happened to the Bible? He says, I got rid of it. I said, why? He says, because most of what was taught in there was against the lifestyle I was choosing to live.
Yeah.
And he said, I put it out aside initially, and then I just got rid of it. He said, I haven't picked up a Bible in 13 months. Zion.
So if we understand these things, then those of us who have chosen to be pastors, those that have chosen to follow Christ, can not only live more productive lives ourselves, we can actually help other people through that process as well. But we, as apologists, we need to understand that if we do away with the understanding of our character and nature of truth, all of this becomes moot. It's just a large gray area. It's just a matter of shades of gray is all that it is. Another clever thing that happened in the radio show. How many of you are going to go back and listen to the radio show again? Yeah. You didn't raise your hands. How many of you are going to listen to the radio show again? Okay. Is that they form what I call false dichotomies. Either this is true or that's true. Where, okay, it's, we're either going to go to Eureka or we're going to go to Reddit. Well, no, I'm going to go to Redway tonight. There's a third alternative, at least a third alternative, right? So there may always be another alternative, but they form these false dichotomies. Well, tell me where you stand. Do you stand for this or you stand for that? Do you believe this or do you believe that? Well, there can be many more other alternatives than just this or that, right? But they're trying to set the parameters for you. If you listen to the radio show, and you're going to, they wanted to draw a blurry gray area that said that morals and mores were the same thing. So cultural mores were the same thing as morals, because that's how we got morals, was from the culture. Right? And then they also said our morals are changing all the time. So I brought back in the word mores. I said, no, you're using the term morals, and you're talking about a cultural more. But you're not talking about morals. Morals are fixed, and I've given you an example of fixed moral that all three of us have agreed on. It's always wrong to torture babies for fun, right? Does that ever change? Has it ever changed throughout all of history? No, it hasn't changed. So the atheist would say, some atheists would say absolute morals do not exist. The atheist I was talking to on the radio says, yeah, absolute morals exist, but they're changing all the time. No, you can't have an absolute moral that changes all the time. That's a contradiction in terms. It doesn't work. Absolute morals exist and are the result of evolutionary processes. Learning to cooperate is an evolutionary process, they said. So what is the problem with Darwinian moral development? We've already talked about that. You can't have some perfection come out of evolutionary processes. There's no other example of that. And so we have to ask ourselves, where did morals come from? If all of us have a particular moral that we can say, yes, that's an absolute. How did we get to where we all had that perfect moral understanding? We don't have a perfect understanding of anything else, but we all have that one perfect moral understanding. No, that can't be explained by an evolutionary process. So if Jesus is the truth and the only way, what about those that have never heard of Jesus? We just talked about what the answer to that is, right? So the progressive theist has all kinds of things. Over and over, the church has in various times and ways ruled that some beliefs are not acceptable alternatives within Christianity. Adherents to these deviations are in fact outsiders to the faith. For example, nearly 100 years ago in a book entitled Christianity and Liberalism, the presbyter J. Grisham Machen. If you've never heard of Machen, you need to read some Machen. He is awesome. J. Grisham Machen argued in an exhaustive scholarly treatment that liberal Christianity, listen to this, liberal Christianity was not a version of the one true faith handed down once for all to the saints. Liberalism, or liberal theology, he says, was a completely different religion from Christianity. Christianity cannot hold to this oneness Pentecostalism. It's not true to the Bible. Christianity can't not hold to open theism. God is progressing. God's getting better. God's good, but he's not all good. God's powerful, but he's not all powerful. Why? Because the Bible clearly says that's not the case. So all of these different religions quoted, quote unquote, forms of Christianity are not forms of Christianity at all. Machen is right. They are totally something other than the Christian faith. So don't get off on these tangents that take you away from the basics of Christianity. The essentials of the faith are always the essentials of the faith. The liberal Christianity of Machen's day focused on a social reform agenda. And this is what we call today social justice. Have you ever heard of black liberation theology? It really started off as a Hispanic liberation theology, is how it started down in South America. The black embraced it here, and it became black liberation theology. And it's all about a social justice movement, where we don't talk anything about Jesus or about the cross or about salvation or any of that. It's just a social justice movement, labeled as Christianity. In the black liberation theology, then everything is flipped on its head in terms of what is true and what is false. Why? Because it's about fairness. Do you see how this is coming back to roost here, so to speak?
One of the proponents of that type of movement is Jesse Jackson.
Yeah.
Reverend Jesse Jackson.
Yeah.
And he really, that comes through in just about any speech of any length he ever brings. Social justice.
Yeah.
It's not fair. It's not fair. It's not fair.
Yeah, it really begins to measure somebody's idea of fairness, and the question is, so whose idea of fairness do we use here? You know, and that's a moving target. So it is sort of an opinionated morality of what is right and what is wrong. Today, there's also an effort to update Christianity, to adapt and to reform it according to the spirit of the age. The New Age church is an example of that. From church pulpits to the Christian biosphere, in other words, online Christianity, from once reliable Christian publishing houses that have published awesome books, you see right alongside those books today, heresy, to the campuses of so-called Christian colleges that are Christian in name only, from the beautiful and historic churches decorated with gay pride flags and pastored by ordained ministers who bless abortion clinics, to the evangelicals who become self-styled spokesmen for what Jesus would really do or say. They become the authority for that. There is, in our day too, a Christianity that is no Christianity at all. It's not about anything to do with Christ, it's about these causes. And when you become cause-oriented and take Christ out of it, that's not Christianity anymore. It's a cause. Maybe it's even a good cause, but it's not Christianity. But we've labeled it as Christianity. And so be careful of those tangents and deviations as well. These things are devoid of truth claims. You'll notice they don't make truth claims, they make fairness claims. They're devoid of truth claims, they're devoid of moral teaching of historic Christianity. What is today called progressive Christianity is not another side of the same coin. It is a different religion founded on a different worldview altogether. This is straight from one of Machen's books. Stone Street actually was quoting Machen there. If you don't know John Stone Street, that's another name you know. He's a modern guy who is now running the Colston Christian Center, Chuck Colson's home ministry. Okay, so what about those that have never heard? Rather than confront the issue, liberal theology waters it down. So rather than confront a difficult issue in the Bible, liberal Christianity just says, well, it doesn't really matter. It's okay. We love you. Just do the best you can. And we never end up sharing Christ with them, and people are literally headed for hell because we want to be nice. And we want to be fair, whatever that means. So what does this Bible, true Christianity, say? Everyone has access to enough truth about God to seek Him. Everybody. Romans 1, Romans 2, and Romans 8. creation, your conscience, and this Holy Spirit. Everyone has access to enough information about God to seek him. Then Romans 1:19 and 20 says creation declares. Romans 2, our conscience speaks. And Romans 8, his spirit communes. Hebrews 11. And without faith it is impossible to please God, because anyone who comes to him must believe that he exists and that he rewards those who earnestly seek him. We're going through a black township, my second year in Africa. My little translator buddy over there was with me, and it was raining like cats and dogs, and the streets were muddy, and it was nasty, and we were just going house to house witnessing to people in this black township. And we came to this one house, and there was a guy leaning up against the overhang of the house. It was raining off the overhang of the house, and he had his foot kicked up like this, and he was standing there, and he had an axe handle down next to him. And he was standing there with about 3 guys on either side of him. And my little translator said, "You don't want to go there, Pastor." I said, "Why?" He says, "No, Pastor, those guys are bad guys. They're bad guys. You don't want to go there." So I said, "No, we need to go." I mean, I was just like a bull in a china shop, stupid American. I'm going to walk up in this guy's yard. He says, "Pastor, we really don't need to go." So we go in the yard. These guys are standing under the overhang. It's raining. We're standing out in the rain. So I start talking to them. They were just silent. They just looked at me. I'm witnessing. They're silent. They just stone faces. No change of expression, nothing. Finally, the guy who obviously is the ringleader has got the axe handle next to him. He looks at me and says, "I've got to question." So what's your question? Is there a back door to heaven? And I'm sitting there thinking, okay, I don't understand the question. Then it just hit me like a ton of bricks. We'd been in the white township that morning, and I'd seen all the black servants went to the back door. And so I'm thinking, I say, Book of John. Jesus said, "I am the door." I say, "Well, there's no back door to heaven. I've got some good news, though." Jesus says, "I am the door, and anyone who seeks me will find me, and anyone can come in that knocks on this door." Here sits this guy. He's back, got the foot kicked up against the wall. These rough-looking dudes on either side. When I said, "No, there's no back door," he had reached down for his axe handle. My little buddy flinched. And I'm just stupid enough I didn't flinch, but he reached for his axe handle. When I said, "Jesus is the door and everyone's welcome," he's just sitting there, no facial expression changed, but big tears start rolling down his face. He said, "People have been coming by here for years, witnessing and telling me that story." Essentially, I'm using my language, but he says, telling me their stories about Jesus. He says, "I've asked everyone that same question. Nobody could explain to me how I was going to get to heaven." And he says, "Now I understand." And he came to the service that night. He got saved. He got a Bible. The truth. Boldness and courage in the face of what appears to be danger, and God takes care of us and gives us the truth. He was seeking all of those years. Seeking an answer. And finally, we just got to witness it. We were there and God used us. We got to witness it. He was seeking and he found the answer. Because God promised if you're seeking, you're finding. You're going to find it. Jeremiah 29:13, "You will seek me and find me when you seek me with all your heart." Liberal theology dismisses truth. Another name for it today, liberal theology, just cancels truth. The whole cancel culture. Just cancel truth.
That's what we have right now.
Yeah. Is the progressive church another form of the perspective of Christianity? No, it's not. What does this open theism doctrine teach. What's at stake here? The whole Christian faith is at stake. If people believe this stuff, they're believing in a false God. This is not the God of the Bible. This is not Jehovah God. This isn't Yahweh. So what is the pivot upon which this change of doctrine is made? It's made on truth. The pivot is that when we throw truth out the door, then we can make it anything we want it to be. I can live any way I want to live. I can be anything I want to be, and nobody can tell me any different. There's a lot riding on this. There's an awful lot riding on this. And as apologists, as Christians, and we're all commanded to be apologists, 1 Peter 3:15, right? We're all commanded to be apologists. We need to be able to defend truth. So you've got to start on it tonight. Next apologetics class, December the 4th. I hadn't locked this in with John yet, but I assume we'll be right back here December the 4th. You'll have Geisler classes 4, 5, and 6. 4, 5, and 6. And you will listen to the K-Mud Radio program again, and you will analyze it by what we've learned tonight. Right?
Yes, sir. Yes.
I want you to be able to identify what I've done in that radio show and why I did it. Because, listen, it's not random. What I did is not a random thing. What I did was apologetics at work in the culture. And I want you to be able to do what I did. Okay? This is important if you're going to be an apologist, if you're going to be a Christ follower and not just a pew sitter. Right? Okay.